Good morning everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Amin here and I am vlogging a week in my life as a genetic counselor, and this is a special edition because all the previous videos that I made are all prenatal genetics, which is where most of my experience lies, but currently I am not doing prenatal, I'm doing cancer and general, and it's actually the second last week of me doing cancer in general. Starting the next month, I'm actually going to be back on prenatal, which is where my heart lies. So I am excited to go back to prenatal. But for my last video, I said if you guys are interested in seeing like cancer in general, let me know. And people did say they were interested. So I thought I would vlog this week in my life before it changes all over again. I will address the elephant in the room. I am sick. So I sound different. I sounded nasally. I'm not happy about it, but I am recovering from a cold. It is Monday. I pretty much got sick on Thursday. I'm feeling much better now, but still not 100%. But today is Monday morning. It's 8:30 a.m. For today's schedule, I have 2 cancer patients, and usually with my new workload, with my new specialties, everything is pretty much scheduled in advance. So my schedule is almost the same every single week. It might change a bit, but I would say generally speaking, the number of cases and the types of cases that I'm seeing is pretty standard. For the cases that I have today, I'll give you a bit of an overview. The first one I have, it's a family history of breast cancer. And so essentially what we're doing is we're seeing if this person is eligible for any high risk screening. And I work in Ontario in Canada, and we have very specific guidelines in terms of who's eligible for genetic testing and who's eligible for high risk screening, because we all have the government provincial insurance. Most of the work is already done in advance because we get the patient's family history in advance. So the pedigree is already done. And essentially, I just confirm all the information that we have on the pedigree. I confirm some of their own risk factors for developing breast cancer, such as like how old they were when they got their first period, how old they were when they had their first child, if they have children, if they've taken like HRT, height, weight, things like that. And then we input it into a couple of different risk model systems, and they will spit out a number that will say lifetime risk of having breast cancer, and then what is their mutation risk, essentially, of in the family. Is there a genetic basis for the cancers in the family? Basically have that discussion with the patient to see what their numbers are. If they meet the cutoff for high risk screening, we offer them high risk screening. If they meet the cutoff for genetic testing, like a mutation risk in the family, then we offer them genetic testing. So I found that cancer is very routine in terms of very similar conversation from one patient to the next. Because you have all the information in advance, they're definitely not as long cases as prenatal. I would say on average, my conversation with the patient is between 20 to 30 minutes. And then we're pretty much ordering the same test for everyone as well, which is nice. Again, in Ontario, everybody gets the same test. So we have like the same panels no matter what lab or what clinic you're ending up at, depending on where you live. So again, it's all very nice. It's very streamlined. You see a lot more high volume in cancers. It's easier to keep up with it in that way. Obviously, every clinic is different, so I don't want to talk about like the volumes of other clinics or what kind of cases they're seeing. We see very routine cases. Usually it's breast and ovarian syndrome cases. I have started seeing a few GI cases, so like query Lynch or polyposis. Those ones are a little bit different, like in terms of the risk model predictions that we have, but still pretty similar again. And then I know other clinics do other types of specialties because there are a number of different cancer syndromes. The GCs at our clinic, they don't necessarily do the other ones. We have geneticists that we work with that do some of the other cancer syndromes. The second case that I have today is a little bit different. Once a week I see like one of these cases that are more urgent in cancer, and essentially urgent means that they typically have a current diagnosis of cancer, or they have like a familial variant or mutation that's already been discovered in the family. So the risk or chances of them having genetic variant is higher. So for these types of cases, the one that I have this afternoon, so basically this person's genetic testing result may impact the type of surgery that they have. So for example, this person, they're going to be eligible for genetic testing. We're going to offer them the panel. We're going to expedite the panel, which means that we'll get the results in a few weeks instead of a couple of months. And with that result, their oncologists or surgeons, they might say, okay, instead of doing a lumpectomy, we might just do a risk reducing bilateral mastectomy. If the risk of them getting another breast cancer is much higher than general population risk, if they find a mutation, for example, that can guide surgical decisions. And so it is more of an urgent type of case. Urgent in cancer is not the same as urgent in prenatal. Usually these people are still waiting like a month or so before they see us. Usually, whereas the routine cases that I was talking about earlier, people are waiting up to a year before they see us. So it's a different lifestyle in cancer. I know a lot of people really like it who like having like a clear path of like a decision tree type of thing, like yes or no, like everything. Almost not everything, there obviously is a bit of like clinical judgment that's involved and discussions that we have with the team, but I would say for the most part it's pretty like black or white whether or not someone is being offered testing. These are just things that I've noticed. If you have any experience, if you're like a GC student and you've had different experiences, or you are a GC, you've had different experiences, definitely let me know. But at least from our clinic, that's kind of what I've gathered it from it. And then the other half of what I'm doing, so this is just part-time, I'm doing cancer, like half of my caseload is cancer. The other half is actually general, which I'll talk about a little bit later, maybe later this week when I'm actually working on those general cases. I try to like have blocks. It is hard, honestly, to work multiple specialties. A lot of GCs actually do more than one specialty, so it is difficult to kind of like maneuver between the two of them. But it's nice with cancer in general because they're both non-urgent. Whereas with prenatal, when I was doing cancer a little bit, it was kind of hard to switch between the two because prenatal is always pretty much urgent. But anyways, all that to say that I'll tell you about the general side of things a little bit later on when I'm actually doing the general side. For today, I've pretty much blocked off the entire day to just do cancer stuff. So cancer patients, admin stuff, doing my letters, you know, calling patients, stuff like that. And then later on this week, I have a clinic with one of our geneticists. In-person clinic, patients will come in and we see them together. That's on Thursday, so I have to do some preparation for that as well. So I will tell you guys more about that later on. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you generally what this appointment looks like, and then if any questions come up, you can just kind of let me know. So typically what we do is we received your family histories information. So what we do is we review that to make sure it's all up to date. And then we talk a bit about, you know, any genetic testing that's been done in the family. We also talk a little bit about what your risk is of having breast cancer throughout your life. There's a couple of things that we discuss. One is to see, is your risk of breast cancer, you know, higher than the general population? Is it considered high risk? Is there any other screening recommendations that we would have for you? And then in terms of genetic testing, we talk about what that looks like for you in the family, if anybody else has had it, if we would suggest it for you. So I just finished both of my cases for today. That's all the patients that I have for the day. And it's 11 o'clock now, so I have 1 hour before lunch to basically do all the admin related stuff for these two patients. So for the first one, where it was the family history of breast cancer, their lifetime risk of breast cancer was 25%, which means they're eligible for the high risk program. So I have to do the referral and do the letter for that as well. So the referral will go to the high risk program saying that they're eligible for annual MRIs and breast mammograms. And then the letter basically just to close the case. It's basically a patient letter to say, so what we talked about, so your family history of cancer, you're eligible for this program, and they're not eligible for genetic testing because the relative in the family that has had cancer already had a negative panel, so there was no genetic reason that we were able to identify for their cancer, so there's no reason to offer testing to the relative. And the one that I just finished, it's a recent diagnosis of breast cancer and doing genetic testing to determine treatment options. So I have to send them the requisition for their blood test and then let their doctors know that we're doing the testing for them. And then that one, I will not do a letter yet. We'll do a letter when the result comes back, the actual genetic test result. So I'm not closing that case right now. So I'm going to do all of that in the next hour. And then I also have to make a phone call to a patient who just got their sibling had genetic testing and then they just got a copy of the report. So I'm going to offer them testing for, I've already met this patient, but their siblings test result was pending. So I basically said, when your siblings result comes back, just like let me know and then we'll take it from there depending on what the result is. So sibling did find like a familial variant, so I need to call the patient and kind of tell them that they're eligible for testing and what that would look like. So I'm going to call them. And that's pretty much it. It's probably gonna take me an hour, all of that information. And then this afternoon, I have a meeting. Our cancer team meets every Monday. So we have like an hour meeting in this afternoon. So basically we review in that meeting all the referrals that came in the previous week. Like if there's any questions about which ones to accept or decline. We talk about those. If anyone has any cases that they want to review, like kind of get anyone's input on certain things, we review all of those. And then if there's any like updates that the team needs to know about, we talk about those as well. So I'm gonna do all of that, and then it's lunchtime, and during lunch, if I'm working from home, which I do 3 days a week, I usually read. And because it's summer, it's actually kind of cold today, which is like exciting, but also not exciting because I don't want winter. I usually read outside, like in the backyard, or I go on a walk or something. So I'm probably going to be reading, especially because I don't feel well. I don't want to go on a walk, and I'm going to the gym after work today. So I'm gonna sit in the backyard, I'm gonna have my lunch, and I'm gonna read my book. Hey guys, I just got home. I went to the office today, and honestly, it wasn't a very exciting day. I didn't have any patients, so it was like an administrative type day. The beginning, like the morning, I spent doing cancer stuff, printing out documents, sending them for scanning, finishing up some patient letters, printing out patient letters, getting them mailed out, all of that fun stuff. I finished prepping for the clinic that I have on Thursday, so kind of finishing up like all of the information gathering essentially that I need to do before reviewing the cases tomorrow, which is Wednesday. So we review them Wednesday for the clinic on Thursday. And then in the afternoon, I finish up some more letters again because I am going back to prenatal. I'm trying to wrap up all of my non-prenatal stuff, like all of the letters. It's usually like letters, so letters that I write to either a provider or a patient, kind of to close the case and get it signed off and reviewed by a geneticist. So trying to wrap up as much of that as I can, and I'm actually almost done, which is great. And then I also had some results to call out. So I called out good news, like normal results today, which was nice. I called out a normal chromosome result for someone who has a family history of a translocation. And then I also called out a normal carrier test report for someone who has a family history of a recessive condition. And both of these people ended up being pregnant when they were actually referred to us for preconception counseling. So they just happened to get pregnant while we were kind of like waiting for things to happen, like test results and records and stuff like that. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. That took the entire day. And then tomorrow I have cancer all day, so I have 3 cancer patients tomorrow. I'll talk you through all of them, and yeah, that's pretty much it for the day. I will see you tomorrow. Hi everyone, it's Wednesday and I just wanted to check in. I have just finished 2 patients this morning. It is like 10:38 a.m. I'm still not feeling great. I have been blowing my nose constantly, so I sound very nasally, but today's my full cancer day. I had one at 9 o'clock, one at 10 o'clock, and then another one at 1 p.m. I'll give you a bit of background from the ones this morning. The first one that I met, they have a family history of a sibling with bilateral breast cancer, and then like a few other relatives with cancer as well. Their sister had negative genetic testing, so there's no additional testing to offer our unaffected patient because we don't have a genetic cause that was found for the cancer in the family, but they were eligible for high risk screening, so I enrolled them in the program so they could have a MRI and a mammogram every year. And then the second one that I met with also has a sister with breast cancer and a few other relatives with breast cancer as well. Their sister also had negative genetic testing, so no testing to offer them either, but they did not qualify for high risk screening. Their personal risk factors were very protective, and so their general population risk and general population screening, so that was good. And for these types of cases, a lot of times it can be reassuring to know that your risk is, you know, not as high as what you imagined it to be, especially when there are multiple people in the family that have breast cancer. So I just finished talking to them, and pretty much what I'm going to do now is try to wrap up these cases as much as possible. So essentially doing all the paperwork, like the referral for the high risk program, which I did in between the sessions. So these cases are like 30 minutes maximum. So within the hour that I have allotted for it, I try to complete everything that I can, but I'm still quite new, so I'm not as streamlined as some of the people that have more experience than me. I'm going to try to completely wrap up these cases, especially because there is no follow-up that's involved in that with them. So for example, for the one this morning, I sent the referral for the high-risk program already. I'm going to now complete the letters, the patient letter. We have pretty like templated letters, so it shouldn't take me too long, like maybe 5-10 minutes to fill in their family histories information, and then pretty much like send that out, send it out as in through the system. And then when I go in person tomorrow, I'll have to print it and then actually mail it out to the patient. So I'm gonna do that for the one this morning, and then even the one this afternoon. Basically all I have to do is a patient letter at this point. I've already done charting, so I try to chart as soon as I'm done the case, so that everything is still fresh in my mind. The one for this afternoon, I don't know what it's about. For these types of cases, we have a lot of support we have a genetic counseling assistant, and so like a lot of the initial prep work is already in the system, so I don't actually have to do much. I will look at it just because, like I said, I'm new, so if I have any questions, I have time now to like ask my colleagues, but it's probably just another family history, and they may be eligible from what I'm seeing for high-risk screening. So it's actually very routine essentially. So I'll go through that this afternoon after I'm done seeing them, and then that's pretty much everything that I have for today. Actually, it's also technically my last full day of doing cancer, starting very soon. Like I said before, I'm going to be on prenatal, and honestly, I don't love cancer. I never have been a huge fan. And for some of you that are watching this, you probably will love it or do love it, which is completely fine. That's one of the great things about going to GC school, is that you do get to try everything. Like you have to do clinical placements or rotations. And if I'm being honest with you, I already knew from before I started GC school that cancer was not going to be for me. All of my volunteer experience was in cancer clinics, and it was just a little bit too routine for me. I do like I call it spice or drama that comes with like high stressful situations, which is what prenatal is. And sometimes that also backfires. It can be too much at certain times, but at least for this like phase in my life, I still enjoy the high stress environments, even with general, which I'll talk a bit more about tomorrow. And also, I haven't mentioned, but I do work a part-time job as well. Usually I see those patients on Thursday, and I just got a text that I do have a patient tomorrow. I'll talk to you about that tomorrow too. This video is super long, but I hope you guys are enjoying it. It's different than my usual week in my life because my whole life has been different, with my new specialties and with my part-time job and everything. But it is exciting, and you know, that's one of the great things about being a GC, that you can use your skills pretty much in every specialty, and also in many different, you know, areas that you work in. Like not everybody works in clinical, and I do feel like the skills that I have can be transferred. So all that to say, I will catch you this afternoon after I wrap up my last patient of the day and hopefully finish all of my administrative stuff, which is most of what we do as GCs is honestly just administrative. Hi everybody, it is Thursday and I clearly went to work, which is why I look decent today. I am going to input a clip of future me telling you about my clinic because I am way too exhausted to go through that right now. Hi, it's future me here to tell you about my cases. So it's an in-person clinic, which is what one of our geneticists, so we see all of the patients together, and some of them in our clinic are like the GC does most of the case and the geneticist pops in, and then some of the more complex ones or the ones that need a intense physical exam, the geneticist will do most of those and then we just pop in. Every clinic is different, so it all depends on where you end up working essentially. The first case that I had, it was someone that has basically some cerebellar atrophy and neuropathy, so it's unclear like why they're having these symptoms. They're also young, so they're like in their 30s, and they're having like these non-specific findings, and so because of that they are eligible for whole exome sequencing, which is one of the most comprehensive genetic tests that you can have. They look at basically all of your genes, all of your coding genes, and they usually take a sample from both parents as well. It was a geneticist first case, so they met with the geneticist and did the whole exam, answered all the medical history questions, and then I basically came on at the end and explained what whole exome testing was, consented them for the test because there are it's a pretty long consent process because there's other things that we could find that are not related to the reason why we're doing the test. There's research opportunities involved with the lab that does the test, and then also we do them typically as trios, which means that it's your sample, the proband sample, but then also samples from the parents or whatever relatives are available, because they do find something, they want to see if it was inherited or kind of what the pattern is of how this is being passed down in the family, if it even is. So the patient came alone, consented to whole exome sequencing, and then in about a week or so, I'll call their parents. So I have their parents' information and see if they're interested in testing as well. We're not actually running the test for the parents. It's just in relation to the proband sample. So that was the first one. We actually do quite a bit of whole exome sequencing, and the rules in Ontario have gotten a bit more lenient. More people are eligible for testing, which is great. So that was that one. And then the second patient of the day, again, it was a geneticist case, so I wasn't super involved in it, but essentially it's a person who has autism, and they were referred to see if there's any additional testing that could be offered to them. They've already had a microarray test, which looks at all of your chromosomes, and that was inconclusive. There was an uncertain finding from that. So essentially we just talked about the result because it was ordered by another provider. So the geneticist basically talked about that result, and then we are also wondering if they have another condition, a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So they met some of the features that are associated with classical Ehlers-Danlos. So we then ordered a panel, which means that there are a number of genes that cause this condition, and we offered them testing for all of these genes to see if potentially the genetic reason for their hypermobility and some of the other connective tissue things they have going on. Gave them requisition, so when the results come back, we'll meet with them again for a follow-up. And the afternoon case I had was a family history of Friedreich's ataxia. So there's a relative that has Friedreich's ataxia in the family, and then this person wanted carrier testing to see if they're a carrier of the condition as well. It's a recessive condition. These types of cases typically would be a GC only because it's a family history. But in this case, this person also had some features that could kind of be related to ataxia, but could kind of not. So they needed their own workup essentially. So because there was already a family history, it was a GC first. I went through all the information about carrier testing, what the condition is, the inheritance pattern, and then I got all of their information, their medical history and their family history. And then the geneticist came on at the end and essentially determined if there was any additional testing or referrals to offer because of their own health concerns. And that was pretty much it. That was the entire day. Not all of them are in person, even the ones that we see on clinic days. So there was, I think, 3 out of 5 of the cases were in person. And then in between all these cases, I'm trying to wrap up documentation, admin related stuff, referrals and requisitions ready for all of these patients as well. So I do get my steps in on these days, which is nice because usually I spend time sitting at my desk all day long. But yeah, once a week an in-person clinic is not too bad. And that is something that I never experienced before because all of my patients were virtual. The 4 years that I had been doing prenatal, essentially, I think I only had 2 in-person patients, and that was by request. Patients wanted to come in and we were like, okay, sure. But usually everything is virtual or over the phone. A lot of cancers on the phone. So yeah, it's just nice to see people in person, and it is a bit of a nicer human interaction. And people are generally really nice and interested in genetics, and that makes sense. The people who are not interested would decline the appointment or not want to come in person, but almost everyone that I meet is super interested and curious, which is nice because that's obviously why we're in the field too, because we are curious and interested in genetics. Because it's Thursday evening, I actually just finished working for my part-time job, which is kind of crazy. It's 6:40 p.m. I had a fertility patient at 6 p.m. Let me just tell you about my day. So I already told you about all the cases that I saw today. I got home by 5 p.m. I took a hard nap for 20 minutes, and then I logged on for my fertility job. I knew in advance that I had a patient at 6 o'clock today, so I logged on around like 5:40 to kind of like review the case. I already knew it was going to be an easy case too, otherwise I would have actually had to prep earlier in the week. So just to give you a bit of a background in terms of what I typically do for this fertility clinic, I am 100% remote. So I never go into the clinic, although I can if I want to, but with my schedule and everything, it just doesn't make sense for me to go and do that. So I work completely remotely. Usually my role is actually to discuss carrier screening results. So I meet with people who are using donors to start their family, and I usually meet with the parents, and then I also meet with the donor separately. And sometimes these donors are anonymous and sometimes they're not anonymous. And I review basically all of their health history, their family's health history, and then we also talk about their expanded carrier screening results. By the time they reach me, they have typically already had expanded carrier screening. So what I'm doing is looking at the overlap between the results that we've gotten to ensure that there is low risk, low reproductive risk for all the people involved using their gametes for embryos. I meet a lot of same-sex couples actually from all over the world, which is pretty interesting. So most of the time my evening hours work out fine, like if people are in the same time zone or similar area of the world, but sometimes I meet people from like Australia or Europe and my work hours don't end up working well with them. So sometimes on rare occasions, I have to use my lunch break at my regular job to do work for the fertility clinic. It's usually pretty quick, and again, it's just reviewing their results. So for a lot of people, it's just explaining what the conditions are that they're a carrier of. Because there are hundreds of conditions that we're testing for, a lot of them are actually pretty rare. Sometimes we'll get like the common ones, but sometimes, actually a lot of the time, I'm actually reading about these conditions for the first time. So I'm telling people what the condition are and then what their carrier result is. If it's one of the parents that I'm meeting with, then I also tell them what the donor's results are, because if they end up using that donor to make embryos, then their child could also be a carrier of the condition the donor is a carrier of. And again, the most important thing I do is looking at if there's any overlap or if there's any risk essentially to future children to inherit these conditions. So that's typically what I do. Today was a little bit different. I met with someone today who is freezing their eggs, but in the future might want to donate them. And essentially I just did the entire donor questionnaire review with them, 3-generation pedigree, and then also some questions, additional questions about their own health and family's health. I've had a few people before that are, for example, using a surrogate. So it's not technically using the donor egg or sperm, but because there's a surrogate involved, it ends up becoming kind of a donor situation. It's a very complicated area. Like I've been in a few meetings and webinars to further understand a bit more what the guidelines are in the country, but it's very it's a very niche area. It's very interesting, but it's very niche. I don't spend too much time actually talking about things like IVF or PGT, which is pre-implantation genetic testing. I actually do that more in like my regular job when I'm meeting with people preconception or prenatal individuals. It depends what your role is. Like I know other fertility clinics or even the labs that we work with actually, a lot of the labs that do the PGT testing, they have genetic counselors that work with them and they kind of explain the PGT process and the IVF process. So I would say I'm more familiar than the average person, obviously, maybe even the average GC, because of my prenatal experience and now my fertility experience, like how exactly probes are created and what's needed and all that information. I think I know more than the average person, but I'm not an expert by any means. So all of that to say, it has been a long week. Tomorrow I have no patients, but I have a lot of administrative work to do. I feel like I've been making this vlog for a really long time. It's obviously a very long video. I thought about making this video like a day in the life of a cancer GC versus a day in the life of a general GC, but then I just got lost in the sauce. So it's becoming a very long video. I think I will do a Q&A style video where you can ask me specific questions about specific specialties now that I have a lot of experience. The last like, I don't know, year in my life has just been a lot of new things that I'm learning. Like this fertility thing I've been doing for about 10 months now. And yeah, it's just like, it's not like a lot of work. It's like I would say 3 to 5 hours a week, if anything. I don't even get patients every week, but when it's busy, it's busy. Like there are some weeks where I actually do meet the 5 hours a week or more. And all of that to say is, this is why I am always behind in my content. Like I have so much content. That's another part. Like I have so many hobbies and I love spending time on my hobbies, and content is obviously a hobby, but I also work full-time and part-time. So it is quite a feat to juggle all of these things together. And I do try to be like pretty scheduled, but again, sometimes you just need those 20-minute naps. So yeah, that's it for today. I am going to like just chill for the rest of the night. I might do some planning for, we have a couple of trips coming up, so I'm gonna do some planning for that. And then Darm's probably gonna be home from work in like half an hour, so then we're gonna make dinner and then just veg out. So I'll catch you tomorrow. Hi guys, it is the end of the day, the end of the week. And if you watched my office makeover video, I am sitting on my big comfy reading chair. And today was an admin day. Honestly, I didn't have a great day. I just like felt really tired, and like there was just a lot of stuff to deal with today, like just administrative things like calls and emails and from patients and doctors that I just wasn't about, but obviously you have to do what you have to do. So pretty much all day today, what I did was I finished writing the consult notes from the cases that I saw in my in-person clinic yesterday. And then I was trying to finish up a few more cases by wrapping them up and writing some patient letters and doctor letters. Like if you talk to any GC, the amount of like paperwork and letters that you have to do is like the bane of our existence. So I did some of those because I'm trying to finish everything before going back to prenatal. And then what else did I do? I had a lot of results to call actually. So I called out a couple of results. A couple of the results were actually from prenatal cases that where pregnancies had ended. And so there was still further testing done on like fetal DNA. So I called out a normal exome result. Essentially there's some, fetal abnormalities, pregnancy had ended, and then we still did further testing to find out like if we could, find a diagnosis for what happened, and it was a normal result, meaning we didn't find anything. So I called out that result. I tried calling somebody else, but I left a voicemail for them. It was also another similar situation. Pregnancy ended, there were abnormalities. We did exome testing. We did not find a result, except for this case, we found something called a secondary finding. So these are basically medically actionable conditions that can come up from doing exome testing, but it's not related to the reason that we're doing the test. So it has nothing to do with, ultrasound anomalies and things like that, but they could still find health issues because they're looking at all of the genes. So we actually did find a genetic condition that was passed down from the mom. So I tried calling them to tell them that we found this, and then they'll basically have to have a follow-up with our geneticist because there's certain medical management that's required now that we know that we actually have a diagnosis for this person that's unexpected. So I was talking about my cases yesterday about the consent process for exome testing, and this is why the consent process is very important and detailed, because sometimes you can find things that are unexpected, so people need to be prepared for that possibility. So obviously I consented them and everything. It still will be a shock, but it won't be like, oh my god, we didn't know that you were looking for other types of things as well. So anyways, I called that result, and then I called a familial variant result for like a brain malformation type thing, which was like there's a person whose child has this brain malformation, and then you could see it on MRI, and then this person also had an MRI that showed the same thing. So we pretty much knew that they had the same thing and they passed it down to their child, but now we have the molecular diagnosis to confirm that. Same thing, I called it the result, and then they'll be meeting with the geneticist for follow-up because they now have a diagnosis and require medical management. A couple of other phone calls that I made was just to follow up on blood work. So we're missing samples, like some of the labs that we work with reached out to us, they're missing samples. Again, a lot of this has to do with the trios, so like parent samples with their child for genetic testing. So if they're missing parent samples, they let us know, and then we contact the parents and be like, hey, when are you going for blood work and stuff like that. So I made a few of those phone calls, and then some patients emailed me asking for reports, so I emailed them back their reports. And then I prepared for my last clinic, which is next week. So my last in-person clinic with the geneticist is next week. So I had to prepare essentially for those cases, and then I will meet with the geneticist a day before and review them and make sure we have a solid plan. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm exhausted beyond measure. I feel like this week was really long, and you probably feel that way too because it's probably a really long video. I have never documented anything other than preconception before, so I hope you guys found it interesting about the cancer side and the general side of things. In our clinic, general means like all ages, like we don't have like a pediatric versus adult type thing. We actually see everything, which is quite interesting. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see any of my other GC content, I have lots of it. I'm gonna put up the playlist here. When this video goes up, it's actually around application time. So if anyone is applying to GC schools, best of luck to you. I have a lot of videos again on the application process and kind of like how to prepare your materials, and then also about interview season. So wishing you all the best with that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.